So perhaps the last thing you might expect to find when you go visit your dad in the hospital after heart surgery is some good questions about life. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. Today I'm sharing some lessons that I learned and questions that I learned from a visit to the hospital after heart surgery. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Infinity, the most trusted name in woven vinyl flooring in the marine industry. Since 2008, Infinity has offered boat owners premier flooring options proven to withstand even the most demanding environments. Each of their products is equipped with UV-stable, fade resistance, and antimicrobial technology, giving them both durability and style that can't be matched. Thinking about kicking carpet to the curb? Make the switch to Infinity and see the difference true luxury makes. Visit infinitylwv.com and use the coupon code BG20 for 10% off any area rug. Limit 1 per customer. It's not like I make a habit of heading to the hospital. It's not like my dad makes a habit of having to have heart surgery, and I hope the same is true for you. This blog post is one that I wrote and thought about in the middle of February, before this whole virus took hold and really added to some complications in our life, for everybody listening, I'm sure. And I realized as I went back to look at this blog post and to read about it, to think about how I might present it today, I thought that the questions that were asked were actually pretty apt to be thinking about now, as we're in the middle of this virus and as we're prepping to go cruising. There are so many things that are the same from one to the other, even though they initially look like they're really, really, really different. So a little background. My dad had heart surgery on the, 10th of February, something like that. All is fine. He's doing really well. One of the things that was pretty wild when he was going through it was they told him over and over again that he really couldn't use his arms until he was fully healed. And you don't realize how much you use your arms. I mean, the next time you're sitting on the side of the bed or lying in bed, try to get out of the bed without using your arms. And there is a little bit of a stretch of a metaphor that you could use for what's going on right now. Because I would imagine that if in the middle of February somebody had said to you, okay, plan your life so that you're not going out and you're doing things from home, it would have been extremely difficult. And I would imagine that for many of us listening, and for many of you listening, that's shifted a little bit now. Just like my dad had to get used to not using his arms, we've had to get used to making do with things we have at home and not going out to go get things on a whim. I hope everybody listening is healthy, that's for sure. But one of the things that I found amazing when we went to go pick him up at the hospital, but when we went in to go pick him up, he had this board. There was a whiteboard that was on the wall in his room. And one of the things that they put on that board are questions. And these are questions that the patients have asked. And so the first questions that Dad asked when he was finished with his heart surgery, or after he came to, after kind of getting out of the anesthesia, was he said, "What are we trying to accomplish?" Followed by, "How long am I going to be here?" B, as a smart aleck that many teenagers are, wrote a third question on the bottom of that as we're waiting for Dad's paperwork to be completed to go out and to leave. And the question was, how do I escape? And these are questions that, if you think about it, are pretty easy to apply to life, right? What are we trying to accomplish? How long am I going to be here? How do I escape? Hopefully part of the conversation is, how do you build a life that you don't try to escape from? And that certainly is important to us as we talk about cruising and getting ready to go cruising, is how do I build a life when I'm cruising that I don't want to escape from? Sometimes people think about cruising as the ultimate escape, where you're leaving all the troubles of your world behind you. And though that's a nice myth, the reality is that you're taking yourself with you when you go cruising. And so if you are setting up your world so that it's not something that you want to escape from, then you will be more successful when you're cruising as well, because you will then have faced up to and looked at and really taken into account the struggles and challenges that you have with yourself and communication and anybody else that you happen to be cruising with. Certainly, when I look at what we're talking about with the coronavirus and the lockdowns that are happening, and if the question is, what are we trying to accomplish? Well, I think the question is pretty apparent. And how long am I going to be here? Much like with life, the answer is I have no idea. We don't know how long we're going to be here. How do we escape? Well, how do we build a life that we're not trying to escape from? And is that a shift in mentality? Is it a way to, is it a question to ask that makes you just stop and pause for a minute? Because if we're trying to escape from something, it means we're trying to leave it behind. And I'm all for saying that I'm looking forward to, as much as anybody else is, this lockdown being lifted so that we can figure out what the next version of normal is going to be. But if I ask it in terms of escape, I'm missing out perhaps on an opportunity of how do I turn this into something that I don't necessarily need to escape from? I also think that sometimes when you're cruising, there are absolutely specific situations and things that you go through that feel like, oh my gosh, I would like to escape this. Thinking about being in the middle of the night when a squall comes up and the wind shifts and all of a sudden you're on a lee shore. Yeah, the question absolutely is then, how do I escape? How do you set yourself up for getting out of that situation that is not one necessarily of your choosing? So even though being in the hospital after heart surgery and being on lockdown during this coronavirus, they're probably not things that any of us would choose to be actively doing. If we think about what we're trying to accomplish, and leave off the question of how long am I going to be here, because that's not one that we can necessarily answer, and change the how do I escape to trying to figure out your own situation so that it's not something you need to escape from, those are actually not bad questions to think about when you're applying them to the cruising life. Whether that cruising life is something you're just investigating, you're actively working towards, or you're right smack in the middle of. What I'm looking forward to doing once we're on the other side of this, I'm looking forward to talking about these questions with you in an anchorage somewhere where we can be closer than 6 feet apart and clink glasses and just toast to our very good fortune of being able to be in a place together and celebrating that. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We're here to answer questions about cruising, whether they're plans, dreams, or things you're actively in the middle of. And we always appreciate it when you share with your friends. Talk to you soon.